really? Oh, my UT Chattanooga to the first round. Hey, where is...
How about that? And we wasted our time watching him thinking he'd be at 104, maybe.
What's up, loyal followers of Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast and the Next Pats podcast? That noise you just heard was the chortling of Rams Brain Trust, Les Snead, the general manager, and Sean McVay, the head coach. Now, I don't think that they were laughing at the Patriots for selecting Cole Strange in the first round. They were more laughing to say, wow, Patriots thought he was better than we did. That's not a joke. The joke might be on us. But Phil, Cole Strange, a guard from UT Chattanooga, he might be a good player. But even ESPN said there was a 93% chance he'd still be available at 54. This is an eye-opening reach.
Oh, this is a go-go gadget arms kind of reach. I feel that way, Tom. And I feel strongly that that's the case, even though I think Cole Strange is a good player.
Right.
So I would like to just say that off the top. I think he can play. I think he might even give you high-end guard play. He's a high-end athlete to me as a comparison for Patriots fans out there and all the people that listen to Next Pats and try to follow these guys as much as they can. He's sort of the Kyle Duggar of guards. He's a great athlete who went to a smaller school, who went to the Senior Bowl and lit it up. And clearly the Patriots fell in love. Now, the big question here and the reason why you can't give this pick a great grade is because of the opportunity costs. You passed by trading down on high-end positions, premium positions, high-end players potentially at those positions. Trent McDuffie from Washington, the corner. Kaiir Elam from Florida, the corner. To get a guard, Tom, that you probably could have had at 54. You might have even been able to have him at 85 in the third round. I mean, LA thought he was going to be there at 104, right?
So, Phil, do you think the Patriots traded back at 21 saying we're going to take Cole Strange at 29? Or do you think any of those players who went between 21 and 28 were players the Patriots would have preferred to take? And they said at 29, look, we can't, we already got an edict. We better take somebody here. We're taking Cole Strange. Any of those players, there's a lot of good ones.
Yeah, I have to assume that they had other players in mind here. Unless, Tom, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this because there's been, we've all been chronicling the Patriots and how they attack their drafts for a long time now. We know they're looking at their current roster and they're looking at their current depth chart and it's on the wall there somewhere in their war room tonight. And they're sitting there and they're looking at a big old hole at a starting guard spot. And it might be the only starting spot on either side of the football, defensively, offensively, that is just vacant. It's blank. Were they looking at that all night and saying, that's the spot we're getting filled because we have a pocket passer and that matters to us. We want to have a strong running game.
Right.
That matters to us. Offense matters more than defense because we're thinking, we're a forward thinking team now. It's 2022. Let's call it what it is. And they saw Zion Johnson go off in the teens. They saw Kenyon Green, the guard out of Texas A&M, go off in the teens. And they said, you know what? The Strange kid will still give us high-end play. We probably could get him in a second, but let's not risk it. Let's fill that spot. It's just too glaring. We need to get that spot filled, and then we'll attack the rest of our draft.
But that requires the team to draft for need. And Bill Belichick has never said, hey, we don't draft for need. But he also says we don't draft for need if the player can't play.
Right.
Cole Strange could still play at 54 as well as he could play at 29. What have you given up? What opportunities did you give up to add Trent McDuffie, for instance?
Oh, yeah.
And take your chances on Cole Strange. Or Chase, you take your chances on some other guard washing ashore. Look, that I think is the maddening aspect of this. If you're going to push away from the table on J.C. Jackson, which was fine, and Stephon Gilmore, which I thought was fine too, and you're going to fumigate your linebacker room and move on from Hightower and Collins and Kyle Van Noy, who was productive, and you're going to start putting the players who haven't been able to get on the field, like Jennings or Perkins or Uche, onto the field, well, that's all fine. But if you're going to create a hole on the other side of the ball that didn't exist and then jump to fill it in the draft with a guy who was projected to go 54th or worse, well into the second round, then it doesn't make logical sense. This is not to say that the 2022 draft will be a failure, but it will forever be the draft in which the Patriots made a robust reach for a player in a need position that they created the need at, while defensively, for a team that couldn't stop the Bills, period, barely stopped and lost to the Miami Dolphins, lost to the Indianapolis Colts for 4 losses in their final 5 games, ignored the defensive talent that the rest of the league was clamoring to gobble up.
Tom, I think you're 100% spot on. And I think, listen, 10 years from now, when we're looking at it, like say Cole Strange turns into Joe Thuney. You know, athletically, I think there are a lot of similarities there. You go to Cole Strange's page on mockdraftable.com and they'll height, weight, speed it for you. And Joe Thuney's name will be there, I think. Joe Thuney, if we look back at that 2016 draft, we'd all look at it and say, well, he should have been taken in the first round. We may end up saying the same thing about Cole Strange. So I want to get that out there. I think he's a good player. But to move back from 21 and pass on Trent McDuffie, pass on Kyer Elam, pass on Quay Walker, who went to the Packers at pick number 22 overall, pass on Jermaine Johnson, the edge defender, who ends up going to your rival, the Jets. To me, it's just a head scratcher. There are a couple of other corners on the board, whether it's Andrew Booth from Clemson or Kyler Gordon from Washington, that I think would have been worthy first round dice rolls. It's a safe pick at guard, Tom, but you have passed up the opportunity to really make your team significantly better, in my opinion. You could have, to your point, another guard that washes ashore in this year's draft class could be somebody like Luke Fortner from Kentucky, who's really smart, had himself a really good Senior Bowl himself, played really well against Georgia during the season, last season. He would have been fine at guard. He would have given you representative play at guard, probably as a 3rd round pick, maybe even a 4th round pick. Same place you got Shaq Mason all those years ago. So that to me is the big issue with this.
And the thing is too, and Michael Felger made this point during the show, if you want a safe pick where a guy isn't going to summarily embarrass you on a Sunday, guard's a good place to go. Jawan Williams cannot be put on the field as a 2nd round pick at this point. It's like turning a battleship out there. That was a 2nd round pick in 2019. The 1st round pick, N'Keal Harry, can't get on the field. So if the Patriots wanted to have a safe pick that they can be almost certain that they can put on the field, they got him. They got him. And you marry him up on one side with Mike Onwenu on the other, who was one of the best rated guards by Pro Football Focus a couple of years ago. And if Isaiah Wynn can play as he played as a rookie before he blew his Achilles, that camp, and Trent Brown doesn't turn into a Zeppelin on the other side, you got a terrific offensive line. But that does nothing to help you stop Stephon Diggs or Tyreek Hill or Josh Allen or Devin Singletary, or we could go on. And that to me is what's fascinating. You make a safe pick here if you're the Patriots, but you did nothing to address the explosion and the explosiveness issues that you have on the other side of the ball. I think Patriots fans will say, hey, apparently you guys know better than Bill. No, but if Bill and Nick Caserio and the rest of the people making the decisions, but primarily Bill, since the buck stops with him, was doing such a bang-up job, then Chase Winovich wouldn't be a Cleveland Brown, and Jawan Williams would be able to play. So would N'Keal Harry, and you would have some kind of production at all from Josh Uche instead of minicamp us going, holy crap, this guy can't be blocked. I mean, that to me is where we're looking at it and saying Bill is far from infallible. In fact, he's extremely fallible over the last few years. And when he's got it on a tee for himself, it seems, at 21 and can't screw it up at a position of need, he's gone off the board as if to say, yeah, well, I mean, you can't make it up. I mean, if you said, here's what the Patriots will do, they're going to trade down and then they're going to take a non-Division I guard. That's what they did. It's a joke. It's a punchline. And again, he might be good, but this is, I don't say it's worst case scenario. It's a caricature of a Patriots draft is what it is, right? It's you've traded down to add value and you've passed on premier positions. Kyer Elam, if they want, and I know just having conversations the last week, I know the Patriots still value the ability to play press man on the outside at that cornerback spot. I know it. And it's a hard skill set to find. It's the reason why the Bills traded up to make sure that they got Kyer Elam. And they're not even looking to be a press man team all that often, but that skill set plays in zone too.
And Kyrie Elam played some zone in Florida, and he could be really good there as well. But you've passed on that at a position where the best guys in the world get paid $20 million a year to move back at a late third and a late fourth and at a guard, which, listen, those guys get paid too. We mentioned Joe Thuney. He's made a boatload of money in Kansas City, and good for him. And Strange may end up being that kind of guy. But there's pressure on him now to be that kind of guy because Joe Thuney went in the third and Cole Strange went in the first. And he's going to be a culture fit, Tom. He's going to be a locker room leader. He's going to be everything they want. I bet Dante Scarnecchia, if he knows this kid at all, and I don't know if he does, but I bet he would fall in love with him pretty quickly because he is athletic and he is tough and he's smart. Everything they want. The question is, could you have had a lot of what you wanted at another position that brings a lot more value to your team and plays in the division that you now have to account for with all the athleticism that they have in Miami and in Buffalo and throw the Jets in there as well.
And you could have also added Cole Strange, most likely. I mean, if the Patriots wanted to get up from 54,
right,
in some fashion, then they probably could have swung something together to get into the 30s where
you still could have had him.
You would have been hanging around.
Tom, let me ask you, because there was one name in particular at that position, that guard spot, Zion Johnson, that we all knew going into the draft, not just because he was a BC guy, but because he was widely considered one of the best guards in this year's class, one of the best offensive linemen in this year's class, one of the safest picks in this draft across positions. If the Patriots traded back and Zion Johnson somehow was there to them at 29, would our analysis be the same, or would we be saying, hey, that's a guy they might have taken at 21 anyway? And would you look at that? Now they've got an extra third and a fourth. Good job by them.
No, absolutely not, because you're looking at someone who is recognized, and we base a lot of our reactions in this first 24 hours on what the perception prior to the draft was. And the perception prior to the draft was most people looked at Zion Johnson as being a top 25 player. 17 seemed a little steep, but he was looked at as a top 25 player from a Division I school that has produced mounds of good linemen over the course of time. What seemed, even that though, would have seemed like an anachronistic move on this Thursday night when you see A.J. Brown going here and Marquise Brown going there and 5 wide receivers going off the board in the first 16 picks in an off season in which wide receivers have dominated the game. And the Patriots are still over here driving a Model T or a station wagon, picking up guards and trading down for value. And, you know, for a head coach who had the onus put on him by Robert Kraft last year, and he responded by taking the quarterback that he needed to have, and then getting Ramondre Stevenson and Christian Barmore, a couple of meat and potatoes players. He has tonight pushed his chips back into the middle of the table with a pick that's not going to win live in the fan base, with a pick that's going to draw scrutiny, with a pick that obviously is going to make people say, well, Bill, I'm not saying you're not smarter than everybody else, but do you have to try and prove it all the time? I mean, really? Look, in 2010, I wanted the Patriots to take Sergio Kindle. And I was like, what are we doing over here when they took Devin McCourty? Sergio Kindle went to the Ravens. He fell down the stairs. I don't know if he ever played in the NFL. Devin McCourty still plays. This could be a pick similar to that. But there was no Sergio Kindle. There was no one guy sitting there. There were like 6 guys sitting there. They're all gone. They're all gone. They're all gone.
The reason I ask you about the Johnson comp is just because I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. Now, again, and I'm not watching guards, and I'll try to talk to as many people as I can before the second round starts tomorrow about what they think Cole Strange can be. I just think like a high level guard is a high level guard is a high level guard. You know what I mean? Like there's not that many grades of he's really good. He's really, really good at that position.
Whatever he can be is not going to stop Josh Allen.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just saying, I think Strange and Johnson, it shouldn't shock anybody if they end up having similar careers. So that's why I ask you your reaction, Johnson versus Strange. And it's based on everything that we've, heard and reported on and written prior to the draft. It's this opportunity cost question. It's playing the game of the draft, Tom. That to me is it's a game. And to me, by going with this player, it's not the position. It's just the fact that seemingly everybody thought he was going to be available much, much later, means you're playing your own game without taking the rest of the participants and what they might do really into account. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because exactly, the other participants meaning the other teams are going to drop. Just to boil it down, it's offensive because the Patriots drafted a player at a position that was filled prior to a trade of a good player. It's offensive because the prime need that their director of player personnel, their linebackers coach, Gerard Mayo, who is bandied about as a possible head coaching candidate, and anybody with two eyes and a working, medulla oblongata could tell that their difficulty was in stopping offenses. So it's offensive for that reason. It's also offensive because the Patriots are drafting a player who would have been around far, far, far longer. So look, when we're talking value, what's the value in taking at 29 a player who, by the account of Sean McVay, for Christ's sake, might be around until 100? What's the value in that? So it's offensive on multiple fronts, no matter if Cole Strange ends up with a red jacket or not.
Right. Yeah,
that's why it gets scratchy. Talk to me about,
you know the name that came to mind while we're sitting there on set for our On the Clock special, when Bert does a great job and he's getting these picks early and he gets the word strange via text and he's like, is that an adjective or is that a name? Like he didn't know. And we're on TV. He's like, is it Devin Strange? And I'm like, there's no way they just drafted Cole Strange in the first round, is there? There's no, really? Cole Strange, UT Chattanooga?
And you're like, it must be an adjective.
Yeah. I mean, it's both. It's both. At this point, it's an adjective. In the third round, where we had him in our latest 7-round mock draft to the Patriots because he is such a good Patriots fit.
Which round?
It's not Strange there in the third. So in my 7-round mock, I had him at 85 to the Patriots. That to me would have made a lot of sense. It would have been a great pick, I think, at that point. What's your grade for this pick, Tom? Like if they got him in the third, I'd probably give it an A-. But they get him at 29 and they pass on Trent McDuffie and they pass on Kyer Elam and they pass on Quay Walker and they pass on Devin Lloyd. What's the grade here?
It's a D- for the reasons I explained. Yeah. Not because Cole Strange is a bad human who at 24 is probably going to come in mature and ready to go, but for all the reasons it's offensive. They filled a position that they created a hole at. They reached on them. They passed up on the places that clearly they needed to shore up, and whatever else reason they had. Phil, what did
people
the
can
AFC
hit the rewind?
What did the AFC East do tonight that opened your eyes?
I mean, the Jets getting 3 players that I thought were borderline top 10. I mean, one for sure top 10 guy, one for sure top 5 guy, and Sauce Gardner at corner, and then 2, I think, borderline top 10 guys, and Garrett Wilson, the receiver from Ohio State, and Jermaine Johnson, who slipped for reasons unknown to me. That's another thing I'm interested in digging on in the next day or so here. All the way down to the late first round, they traded up. They wanted him so badly, and they get him at 26. That's a potential franchise-altering first round for the New York Jets, because, again, just look at those positions. And I'm not saying the Jets are smart and the Patriots are dumb. Any team that would take a center in the first round, like
by numbers. I mean, sometimes it's okay to paint by numbers, Bill.
I agree, especially when there are good players at important positions. Sometimes it's that easy. When you've got good players available at important positions, and the important positions in the game today are the ones that impact the passing game most. Quarterback, receiver, corner, tackle, edge rusher. Boom. You get good players at those positions. First round's a great place to get them because they're cost effective. You don't have to dip into the free agent pool to try and buy them because they're incredibly expensive. So the Jets, to me, had a really aggressive, by trading back into the first round, and smart draft on Thursday night. That's not an adjective we usually use with that team.
And the Bills jumped up to get into the first round to make a draft selection as well.
They were at 25. So they just jumped up a couple of picks. but they leapfrogged, they leapfrogged the Cowboys, which is interesting to me. I'm not sure. Maybe the Cowboys they thought were hot on this player, Kaiir Elam, but I wondered at the time as it was happening, I wondered if they thought the Patriots might trade back up. So the Patriots traded down to acquire capital, and then maybe they move from 29 to 24 with the Cowboys or something to that effect in order to get Kaiir Elam. They end up getting aggressive, just a couple of picks up, and they get a really good corner who's going to play opposite Tre'Davious White now, and he's going to be another player that the Patriots have to contend with.
And they keep Kaiir Elam away from, ostensibly, if the Patriots were going to move up, away from the Patriots, that the Patriots could have deployed against, say, Stephon Diggs.
Would have been a great matchup guy for Stephon Diggs.
Meanwhile, he becomes a weapon that you can use maybe against tiny little Tyreek Hill, but the Miami Dolphins, without a selection in the first round tonight, but adding Tyreek Hill earlier in this offseason improves drastically on their end. Some of the names that the Patriots could add on Friday in the second round and third round, where they have 2 third-round picks, Phil.
Yeah, it's a great question, Tom. I mean, listen, by adding the capital that you've added, I would be looking to make a move similar to the one they made last year in the second round, where they dealt 2 fourths and they shot way up and they were able to get Christian Barmore, who became a starter, starting caliber impact player for them right away. I would be looking to do the same thing, whether it's with the Bucs at 33 overall. We know they've executed trades with them in the past, although the Bucs just got that pick from Jacksonville, whether it's with the Texans, that's a friendly face. The Seahawks is a team that they've done a bunch of deals with. I think you're at 54 now, Tom, and it's too long a wait to still grab a player that's in the second tier of talent in this year's draft. I think once you get to pick 50, the level of play starts to diminish a little bit. So somebody like Kyler Gordon, the corner out of Washington, really athletic, a little bit raw because he's basically had 1 year as a starter, but he tackles, he plays special teams. He's got a great athletic background, which is kind of a fun story where he's done dance extensively as a young kid, ballet, kung fu. It shows up in his play because he's always very balanced, which I think is a really underrated trait in cornerbacks. In his transitions, when he goes from backpedal to clicking and closing and moving forward, are so quick that he's got a ton to work with. And I think they would be excited to work with him because he can play man. So that's a guy that I would be getting aggressive for, moving up and trying to get. There are some receivers here too, Tom, that I think are first round talents, whether it's Christian Watson from North Dakota State, Sky Moore from Western Michigan. These guys were sort of borderline first rounders, but really good athletes, even though they're coming from smaller schools, and the types of players that I think have the potential to be game changers. Look, clearly you wanted to add offensively early here. Christian Watson ain't helping you defend Josh Allen, but he makes Mac Jones a little bit better potentially, and maybe that makes your entire team better.
And there's a couple of linebackers too who might be off the board between 32 and 42. It's Jacoby Dean, Christian Harris, for instance, Phil. Yeah.
Yeah, you got a guy too though that you like.
Oh my God, Chad Muma.
Chad Muma's, listen, he's got some size. He's 240 plus, which is what the Patriots usually like, but he's also fast. He's really good against the run. I've been told, I talked to an NFC linebackers coach earlier this week who said he's a lot like Logan Wilson, who just started in the Super Bowl for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's probably a little bit better against the run than Wilson. Wilson might be a little bit better against the pass, but Muma would be an option. Another special teams guy, a guy the Patriots I think would love. Troy Anderson's another great story, talking about Kyler Gordon's background. His background at Montana State. So Montana State, quarterback is the position he started at. Then he plays running back. Then he plays outside linebacker. Then he plays basically 1 year of inside linebacker, Tom. 243 pounds, 6'3". The comp that I was given in terms of the size and speed, he's not nearly as refined as this guy ended up. But the comp I was given was he's Brian Urlacher in terms of size and speed. Like that, he is that athletic. He might be the best athlete at that position in this year's draft. He's going to be a second round pick.
If you're going to go with Lenore Ryan, Montana State, and UT Chattanooga, with 3 of your top picks in a 3-year span, you're just daring the owner to say something. You're just begging him. Say something.
This is another pick though. Cole Strange and Troy Anderson would be the same way. Chad Muma would be the same way. The value of the Senior Bowl to this team is through the roof. I mean, we might as well just be looking at Senior Bowl guys when we're talking about early Patriots picks, I think, from here on out.
It's so whacked because, which is it? What matters? Does the film matter? Does the level of competition matter? I mean, does it matter that your kids at college with them as it was when Greg Schiano was at Rutgers and so was Steve Belichick? Does Kirk Ferentz matter? Or Urban Meyer matter? What matters? It's a moving target. And in the end, when you end up with a guy from Lenore Ryan or UT Chattanooga, it's just, look, the Patriots draft is not a failure. The Patriots can leave tomorrow night with a really good guard, a nice speedy linebacker, perhaps a productive wide receiver who has great upside, and we'll have our frown will be turned mostly upside down. But you can't escape the simple fact that in the first round of the 2022 NFL draft, the Patriots put on their go-go gadget arms and made a massive reach for Cole Strange. It's been a strange night, Phil, hasn't it?
Can I just share a couple quotes? Because Bill Belichick's speaking with the media right now.
Ooh.
But two things. Number one, he says he wouldn't have been there much longer. Cole Strange would not have been there much longer, in Bill Belichick's opinion. So that's his call. They've got intel on teams and what they like and what they don't like. That's certainly, I would think, better than ours, but that's something that we hadn't heard prior to the draft. The other thing he said was the Patriots, if they had stayed at 21, Strange likely would have been the pick. So, I mean, that is at least, Tom, that is sticking to your board. That is not caring about what anybody else says about anything. And maybe you felt like you ran a little bit of a risk by trading down as far as you did and hoping you could still get the guy. But again, playing the game. How are you playing the game? How are you gauging where other teams feel like these players are going to go? Because by taking Cole Strange in the first round, it seems to me that you're ignoring that these other positions that are more valuable to everyone else across the league are going to go first. So even if you like him, it's an extreme comparison, Tom, but if we were talking about a punter right now, okay, you could say, well, we love this punter. We think this punter is the best player in the entire draft. Should you still take that punter in the first round? Even if it's in the 20s, you think he's the number one player in the entire thing. No, you shouldn't, because nobody else has taken that guy that high. So play the game. Be willing to play the game.
That's the interesting thing, because Jordan Richards was obviously a guy who was going to hang around forever. Tavon Wilson was a guy who was going to hang around forever, but the Patriots valued him so much, so they went and took that. There's no line there. There's no line in front of that counter, and there's not going to be a line in front of that counter. Keep shopping elsewhere, and then come back and get that thing where there's no line. But apparently the Patriots thought there was going to be a line for Cole Strange. Phil, for me, for you, for all of us, we'll see you tomorrow.